Hi everyone, it's John Hennessy back with another podcast, and today we're talking about visiting China. If you are doing a martial art, there will be a country of its origin that it will be home to. And if you're doing Taekwondo, for example, it'll be Korea. If it's Japan, you're working through karate or Aikido or something like that. And if it's China, you're doing something like Tai Chi or Kung Fu or Jeet Kune Do. And there's an argument for saying, as Bruce Lee was born in America before moving to Hong Kong, that Jeet Kune Do is more American in terms of birth than Chinese. But today's talk is about China because a lot of people now, the world's a lot more smaller with everything, and I strongly believe that even if you weren't into martial arts, China is an incredibly impressive country to visit. There really is no country on it like on Earth, and it has a culture going back definitely documented 5,000 years and probably up to 7,000 years, and it's known as the Middle Kingdom. In Chinese, that's pronounced Zhongguo, Middle Kingdom, Middle Country, for a reason. It's not to say China has everything perfect, but what it does have is a claim to being the home of Kung Fu and Tai Chi, Chuan, of course, and latterly Jeet Kune Do. I was fortunate enough to meet with an instructor who lived in my own hometown, actually, who was Chinese, but also later to meet another instructor out there in China who taught me the style of Chen Tai Chi and some elements of Jeet Kune Do, and introduced me to another master who was a Qigong master, actually, and knew quite a lot about pressure points as well, which was really interesting to observe and feel and take part in and learn, of course. Now, I may make it sound like there's a Kung Fu master on every street corner in China. Maybe there is, but the best ones tend to be very humble and subtle, and you probably wouldn't know how good they were until you engaged in combat with them, which is probably not a good idea in China because most of the men carry a knife, there's a death penalty in China, so it's not a good idea to carry a knife or stab someone. But you will see fights kick off on the street, and they will be armed with knives. The level of Kung Fu you'll see will vary from province to province, from Beijing and Shanghai on the eastern side to Xinjiang and Tibet on the western side. But if you go to China, a lot of people will try and direct you to the most popular places for tourists, such as Beijing, Shanghai, for two, and I'd probably throw in Hong Kong or Xi'an as a third one. Xi'an is part of Shanxi province, and Xi'an is where they found the famous terracotta warriors, and it was one of the things that I was really impressed with when I went there in the early days. My favourite place in China is Shanghai. Years before the internet, you could get rough guides to certain countries and Lonely Planet guides, and I had two Lonely Planet guides about China. One was about the country itself, and the other one was specific to Shanghai. And it's just a really different place from a cultural perspective. If you love Chinese food, wherever you get it from outside of China, I can tell you it's very different when you're in China, because that's the real Chinese food. In fact, I was in Beijing, and there was a noodle house purporting itself to be the best noodle house in China, which is quite a statement considering how many places you can get noodles and rice from. The best food I ever had was in Kunming in Yunnan province, which borders Vietnam, and I can heartily recommend Yunnan province. you know, you can do your martial arts journey without having to go to China or Japan or Korea or any of those places. But here's the thing. If you go there, I promise you'll come back even more energized about the style that you're doing. Some martial arts instructors, and I've toyed with this idea actually, do retreats to these places where you can actually go to the temple in Henan province. You can go to the Shaolin temple, because I've been there and trained there for a while, and it was very hard training, I have to say. Kind of some of the most difficult things I've ever done were at the Shaolin temple in Henan. But if you're going to become a martial artist of a decent standard, it's good to expose yourself to the harsh realities of it, and how the Chinese got so good at Kung Fu and so disciplined, and how the Japanese really view karate as a, you know, they don't use a coloured belt system in Japan. It's black and white. If you're a decent standard in karate, you wear a black belt, and if you're not, you will wear a white belt until you're good enough. And I actually think these things are very good in terms of motivating a student and disciplining them, because not everything can be, you know, sort of corrected after a few weeks or a few lessons. It takes a discipline that really only the Chinese, the Japanese and the Koreans know, because their dedication to that style is something to behold, and we really should apply ourselves in the same way too. Donnie Yen, who's been doing Kung Fu movies for well over 30 years, I saw an interview of his on a DVD of the Once Upon a Time in China Part 2 film, and he said that you had to do the same kick expertly 30 times, and then another 30 times, and then, you know, basically a lot of times, and you had to hit it each time. There wasn't any margin for error, because if they missed that kick and doing it the right way, then it would ruin the take, it would ruin that particular segment of filming. And although there's a lot of retakes in films, I think it's more to do with the storyline. It's not so much to do with the martial arts action, because the martial arts director will be expecting that to be on point. He'll expect the actors, the martial arts actors, to be able to do those moves, and then they can just advance onto other parts of the story in the film. It's an eye-opener. If you really are interested in Kung Fu and Karate, you really should get on that plane and take that journey, because it will change your life. You know, you might talk about other countries that you've been to, but I think these countries that tie in with something that you're doing as a hobby, as a vocation, as something that's intrinsically part of you, that has fused with your blood over the years. What greater way to see it is to see it in action, for real. When I've gone to China and I saw Tai Chi being practiced in parks by sometimes hundreds of people, that was really quite something. You see people in England at a bus stop just standing waiting for the bus to come, but in China they're practicing Tai Chi or stance work by before they're waiting for a bus, which is usually crowded in China, by the way. So I can heartily recommend it. And these days it doesn't have to break the bank. I think most plane journeys from Europe, from England, would cost about £500 or £600 to go to China. Hospital, I was going to say hotels. Let's hope you avoid hospital. Get all your vaccines before you go and eat well and safe. Those would be my advice. But certainly the hotels are not expensive. You know, even if you get a 4-star one in some of the main provinces, they'll still be reasonably priced, you'll find. And people are friendly there, even the police, and, you know, all those people that, you know, they are quite friendly to foreigners. So it's like any country. If you respect the rules of the country that you're in, you won't have any problem. China is a communist run state, so You have to respect that if you go out there, because they will respect you. It's not a place to do your pro-democracy rants, because they've got their own version of democracy, and it's called communist capitalism. So if you do go out there, drop me a line in the comments, or if you've already been out to China or Japan or any of those places where your style comes from, if you're doing Krav Maga or it's from Israel, which is another interesting place to go, let me know in the comments. Okay, thanks for listening. I'm signing off, and I will talk to you soon.